you very much. Yeah, it's a perfect day and perfect time, perfect place for today's public diplomacy conference, just except for the time, right after the lunch. But anyway, with very interesting discussion today, we can overcome, I'm quite sure, we can overcome our fatigue anyway. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Associate Dean Park Tae-gyun, Professor Chilpotai Yavis, and Professor Nancy Snow, Professor Lee Gun, I'm sorry, he's not here yet, Professor Jo Gi-soo, Dr. Kadir Ayan, distinguished participants, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm very much pleased to be attending today's conference for graduate students, especially given today's topic as a Director General for the Public Diplomacy, Korea's public diplomacy. Before I begin, I would like to sincerely express my heartfelt appreciation to the Hangang Network and to the Seoul National University Grade School of International Studies for working so far closely with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs in organizing today's conference. My thanks also go to all the professors here for taking their valuable time to participate in today's event. We have long benefited from your expertise in public diplomacy, and I personally look forward to learning from you during your discussions today. I would also like to recognize the 10 graduate students presenters. You have demonstrated exceptional ability in articulating your views on Korea's public diplomacy, and I congratulate you for being invited to present your papers in front of these esteemed group of experts. I am especially grateful for the large attendance by foreign students here, who I believe represent the bright future of Korea's relations with their home countries. Ladies and gentlemen, it is said that the rapid spread of globalization, informatization, and democratization across the world necessitated diplomacy to go beyond traditional engagement just between governments to one in which their peoples become practitioners and audiences of public diplomacy. Public diplomacy aims to promote the national interests of one country through understanding, informing, and influencing audiences in other countries, as well as broadening dialogue between private citizens and institutions of the countries concerned. Therefore, in public diplomacy, private citizens as well as government can play and must play their own role as active and real actors. Among them, I would like to put an emphasis especially on students as important players in public diplomacy. Students are especially adept at learning the local culture and will later assume the important roles in their home countries. It is, therefore, important for us to help them to build friendship with their friends in Korea. And I also would like to draw attention to valuable contributions by professors here and academics to public diplomacy. As professors and academics themselves are main players of public diplomacy, and it is still in infant stage, our government needs their insightful expertise. Our government is also in possession of valuable expertise and experiences to share with you, with its civilian partners, with our civilian partners as a traditional practitioner of diplomacy. In this regard, I encourage even more events like today's conference, which can provide valuable opportunities for foreign students, professors, and Korean government officials to network with each other and exchange views on Korea's public diplomacy. More dialogue stimulates more ideas while helping identify needs and challenges. Finally, before concluding, I would like to thank you all once again for taking part in today's conference, and I look forward to a lively and fruitful discussion that will hopefully offer new and more productive ways and means to examine the way forward for Korea's future public diplomacy. Thank you very much.
It is my great pleasure and honor to have a welcome remark before this very great graduate student conference here. I would like to express my appreciation to the Director General, the Choi Young-sam at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who support this conference very actively. And also I would like to express my thanks to the Professor Nancy Snow and organizers of the Hong Network, who selected the GSIS as the main stage of this kind of the conference. And I believe that this conference clearly very helpful to our students and the other students from the Korea and all over the world to understand this public diplomacy in not only in Korea but also in the world. Actually, last night I had a very interesting talk show with several foreign experts and the professors. The one from the Beijing University, who is Jocelyn, specialist in Korean traditional the music instrument, and others, for example, Dr. Cheria, who got the PhD at the GSIS last year, and also the AlphaGo from the Turkey. He also participated at the talk show last night. Is held by the Korea Foundation. We talked about the foreigners' life in Korea, and they tried to compare their life 20 years ago and now, and they also try to evaluate the Korea's regulation, Korea's life, and the Korean society. It was so interesting time, and also there's so many Koreans, common Korean people, they joined the talk show last night, and really realized that this kind of the public diplomacy and the cultural diplomacy is so important. And mostly, actually, the expert, they just stress and pay attention to the political power and economic power. But nowadays, as so many the experts stress, actually the soft power is the more and more important. And I think that I dare to say the GSI is one of the pioneers to stress the importance of the soft power in the Korean foreign policy. And Professor Ligon, he is first professor who opened the class on the soft power here. Unfortunately, last semester and this semester he is now on sabbatical, but is Dr. Kadir Ayhan still to continue to have the class on the soft power, and he tried to stimulate the Korean students and the international students at GSIS to feel the more and significance of the soft power in the foreign affairs. And I believe that this kind of the conference make the more and more the expert on the soft power and public diplomacy, and also we should pay attention to the civil society's activity and their roles in the foreign policy. And the last, I would like to give the appreciation again to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also the Hong Network. And I hope you have the very great conference today. And I'm very sorry, I have to leave early because I have another meeting at the Institute for the Unification and Peace. So probably during the keynote speech, I have to leave. But I believe that this conference would have the very successful, and also this will continue the next year again. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. This is a great event. So my name is Jafar Tayayevuz, but it's long and boring, so I go with Jeff. Much easier. I'm a professor at KAIST. I guess the second best university, right, or the first university. So there's always a debate between SMU and KAIST. Anyway, so we founded this organization, Hong Network, quite recently. And we are so pleased that this is our big major event in terms of academic event. And it's public diplomacy. And thanks to the Director General and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, their generous support and guidance, we're Dr. Cho Yan-sung. So we are very happy to provide this for you and the graduate students who made this event possible. I think they're doing the work actually. And Professor Park for giving us the space and working with us thoroughly. So we're so happy. And I say to my students all the time at KAIST, graduate students are the people who's going to make Korea's future bright, not us. Professors already gone that stage. I mean, we're just guiding, we're just benefiting from your work. You guys will make us proud. So thank you.
How much time do I have? I'm from the Deep South, and usually it takes 30 minutes for me to introduce myself. So I think you gave me from 140 to 210, and it's now 148. Okay, I'm really delighted to be here, and thank you for that introduction. Last night I was given a very precious gift. It said Made in Korea. And I'm sure you all are familiar with it. It's the black lacquer wood with the mother of pearl inlay. It was very touching. I've loved mother of pearl since I was a child. First, it was because I liked the name, since I love my mother so much. And second, because it shines so brightly. Inside the box, it said, "We are pleased to meet you, Professor Nancy Snow." It said it in both boxes. One of the boxes is for my business cards, my meishi in Japanese. If you want to know what public diplomacy is, this is public diplomacy, that gift. This gift welcomed me officially to Korea. And public diplomacy is all about having a welcoming heart that seeks understanding and to be understood. It's really that simple. So as we listen to papers, we hear the scholars today. I'm sure you'll have wonderful work and data-rich discoveries. But I'm a very simple girl in how I view the world. And I think we're living in a world now that needs to be better informed, to be more engaged, and not just online, although I am on Twitter. I'm at DR Persuasion, and I was trying to figure out how I could live tweet during my talk. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm online right now. So, diplomacy, if we were to break down public diplomacy, let's start with diplomacy. It refers to the art or practice of conducting international relations. I have an international relations PhD, and so we would study negotiation and trade and treaties and agreement. We think of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when it comes to diplomacy. The second definition of diplomacy, though, is, quote, tact and skill in dealing with people. That's the second definition of diplomacy. We often don't hear that second definition. It is the second definition where I believe the soul of good public diplomacy lies. And yes, I use that word soul. So, do you want to just study public diplomacy or also practice being a public diplomat? I suggest you do both. I worked at the United States Information Agency and the US State Department during the first term of the Clinton presidency, which we may be saying again very soon. Okay, I was just waiting. And I was a cultural affairs officer and academic exchange specialist in the Fulbright office. So I was the Fulbright desk officer for Spain, former Yugoslavia, and Germany, big, big programs. If you notice in my title, it wasn't public diplomat, because in the early to mid 90s, 20 years ago, we weren't using public diplomat. We didn't even have curriculum in public diplomacy. The word had been around. It was coined by a retired diplomat, Edmund Gillian, as you all know, at Tufts University, the Edward R. Murrow School in 1965, but we didn't use the term public diplomat. Now you hear it quite widely. While I was at USIA, I became a speechwriter. And I wrote feature articles, press releases, I wrote speeches, including words that were delivered to the White House to try to get some information in Bill Clinton's inaugural speech of 1993 about the importance of international exchange, but I don't think my words made it into his speech. I did this speech writing because no one in the agency was doing this. And I just simply asked if I could write stories about what we were doing inside USIA. And USIA didn't really have a domestic constituency, so the American people were not terribly aware of what we did. When you're doing public diplomacy, you're often directing what you're doing overseas. So key point today is that there has to be a public education element of public diplomacy. It's not enough to just have public diplomats or diplomats doing public diplomacy. You have to educate the people within your country about the value of public diplomacy. So when people ask me what I do today, you ran off a number of titles. But I always start by saying I'm a writer. And I'm a writer who happens to teach, I'm a writer who happens to consult. But I still tell them I'm a writer, because whatever your public diplomacy goals are, you need to be a good communicator, both in oral and written communication skills. You need to be able to tell a good story. The motto of the USIA was telling America's story to the world. Every day I saw this. I wrote about this in my first book. I always thought it should have 2 lines: sharing America's stories with the world, and then the second line, listening to the stories that the world has to share with us. But we just said telling America's story to the world. In order to tell a good story, you need to interview people. You need to write profiles that will inspire others. And in order to conduct better public diplomacy, you need to get away from the office at times. You need to get outside the ministry. And you need to talk to people from all walks of life. I live in Japan, and guess what? I've never had a language class in Japanese. Now, I'm learning Japanese here and there. I plan on taking Japanese language immersion, but I don't let my lack of Japanese language skills prevent me from meeting people all the time. I talk to people. If you show interest in people, they have a story to share with you. That's really fundamental to what public diplomacy is. Recently, I was given an opportunity by the MOFA of Japan to cover the G7 summit. You may have heard of it, at Ise Shima. You might think that my article in the Japan Times would be about agenda items at the G7 summit, but it wasn't. I wrote about the people I met who made my experience more pleasant. They were all volunteers, and they were mostly women. So I turned it into an article about women's empowerment. They were, in fact, the public diplomats, the citizen diplomats, whose hospitality Omotenashi, was critical to making the summit experience a success. They're sort of the unsung heroes. Here's an excerpt from my article I just want to share as an example of storytelling about public diplomacy. Another random act of women's leadership came from an Issei Shima Summit volunteer at Mikimoto, Pearl Island, located in Toba City, Mie Prefecture. By now, I had been on my feet for hours and was feeling quite peaked. My phone battery had died. Yes, I have an iPhone. My camera battery was weak, and my body was even weaker. Within minutes of arriving, a volunteer asked what she could do for me. I'm sure she could see that a number of batteries, as well as myself, needed recharging. She immediately found electricity and gave me her chilled tea. I designated her my Summit Star volunteer and asked her where I should send a letter of thanks. She responded, now you listen women, she responded, I'm just a housewife from Nagoya. That was her response. I laughed and I said, well, first drop the word just before a housewife in your vocabulary. You're making a big difference to me as a citizen ambassador for Japan. Then I asked her, how did you get here in Toba? What is your story? She told me she applied as a volunteer. She answered an ad and she received both English and hospitality training. And where did my star volunteer end up? Within minutes, she was serving as a translator to the G7 spouses as they graciously worked the line to greet the AMA divers, those famous divers who go to get the shells, and the local residents. Why do I say that you need to get away from the corridors of power and go and meet the everyday people? It's quite simple. Those of you who study international relations, you know that we are in a time of democratization of international relations. Everyone feels both more connected and more disconnected to public policy these days. Citizens have a love-hate relationship with their representatives, with public servants, with government officials. I know this. I was once a government official. In order to do your job better, you must have an ability to listen on the ground to what people are saying, what they think. Listen to the people. And from that active listening, you will be able to craft policy-related stories that are more publicly accessible and that will have the power to build mutual understanding. I just had the privilege to hear 85-year young Johan Galtung. Some of you all may know him. He's the founder of Peace Studies. And he delivered 2 keynote addresses in Japan. He made several points that jumped out at me related to public diplomacy. One of the points he made was the need for more empathy. Empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another being, human being, is experiencing from within the other person's frame of reference. In the Native American tradition, which is part of my heritage, we often say, walk a mile in another's moccasins. In whatever program you have in public diplomacy, you should present it as if you were trying to understand the experience of the person whose support you are seeking. Too often, I've seen public diplomacy programs that are run from the perspectives of the organizers alone. Those programs may run very smoothly, but there isn't enough sensitivity to the needs and the wants of the program participants. So you need to plan your programs according to the others' perspectives. And you'll be surprised at how much more positive reception you will receive. Why? Because I've taught persuasion for many, many years, and most persuasion is self-persuasion. We can be influenced by other people, but when we come to some conclusion, we like to think it's our own mind that concluded that, whether or not that's true. But nothing you can do to enforce a point of view will work well if people don't feel respected and feel as if their perspectives are being accounted for. Galtung also referred to peace as peace relations. Peace relations, when you shift it to relations, it immediately causes you to think about your relation with other people. Human relations. It's an ongoing process. We need to view public diplomacy as a process, not just an outcome. The Korea Times headline today read, "Park ditches trust politique." But the everyday work of public diplomatic relations will go on. So you shouldn't just be discouraged by headlines. Headlines change all the time. I also want to encourage Korea's public diplomacy to be a bridge across East Asia. Hangang Network is a perfect descriptor for what Korea should do to raise its profile. Geographically, you're already a bridge between two superpower economies. There is now an unprecedented number of persons crossing borders in this area of the world. And yet, how often is this part of the world cast off as just a troubled region with a lot of tension? It's just not true. We haven't told enough stories. Ultimately, we want to live in peace. We want to trade in goods and services. We want to travel, to see new places, make new friends, see family and old friends. That's the East Asia I know. I also know the darker side. I know the tensions. But the good stories of this part of the world far outweigh the bad. That's where you come in. Part of what you do as public diplomats is to put in place the foundations of peace building, which in turn relate to building the security of a nation. We help to build peace by showing faith in the power of publics to both understand and act on the stories that are shared one with the other. That is why I feel so strongly that public diplomacy needs to be both a scholarly discipline with books and journal articles, but just as important, it needs to be a big tent for non-scholars to understand their roles in the public diplomacy process. We cannot make public diplomacy just an elite endeavor. For the scholars who present their papers today, I ask you to do this. I'm going to give you an action plan. I ask you to take what you've researched and share it with a non-academic audience. Write a blog, an editorial in your local newspaper, present it at a civic meeting. There's so many different platforms for this now. But whatever you do, don't just publish it for other academics to read. We are not just diplomats or scholars. We are public diplomats with the modifier emphasis on public. If you take away the word public, you are left with diplomacy, which has an entirely different meaning to people. More traditional, more top-down, more closed-door than public diplomacy. Finally, my co-editor for the Rutledge Handbook of Public Diplomacy was Philip M. Taylor, whom we lost to cancer in 2010 at the age of 56. Phil shared a quote in his book, Munitions of the Mind, and I often cite it in my work. He said, "We need peace propagandists, people whose job it is to increase communication, understanding, and dialogue between different peoples with different beliefs." Whenever I read that quote, I think of my work at USIA, the State Department, and now as a professor of public diplomacy. You will notice in that quote that it's a process statement. In other words, he says, we need to increase communication, understanding. So there's no end goal there. Every day you make it better. Do not be discouraged if you do not make peace or increase mutual understanding overnight. It's a lifelong pursuit with intervals of the wind at your back and intervals of strong headwinds. But I guarantee you that if you focus on people and the process of increasing communication, understanding, and dialogue between different peoples with different beliefs, your sense of purpose in life will be fun, rewarding, and educational. Thanks for your attention, and let's have a great conference today. And I think I was right on time. How unfortunate. Do I have time to take a question or no? Okay. I don't know if anybody has a question or comment, or if we want to just roll into the papers. Does anybody have a comment? Doesn't have to be a question. You, sir, on the front row.
What is the role of social networks?
Well, I would, I don't think they're any replacement for, if you're talking about Facebook, Twitter, the whole social media, they're good and bad. I don't see them as a replacement for what Edward R. Murrow referred to as the 3 feet gap between people in communication, face to face. And I'm worried, I've written about this more recently, that we are losing our ability to have conversation somewhat because we're more comfortable now texting to each other. I mean, a lot of people are. Now, I text. I have no problem with the new media. I go with the flow. But I also really call on my students to look at each other, to engage back and forth, share ideas. And you can get a lot more information from that. If I send a text that's misunderstood, then we end up going back and forth and back and forth. We don't have that communicative context. There are some social media that are more valuable because you can have the face-to-face using the platform, like Skype. I use Skype readily, and you can do video conferencing or Google Chat or whatever you may use. But I think too often we fall in love with certain technology and we don't think about, again, the fundamentals of communication. I've heard for years as a professor, over 20 years, when we ask employers, what are you looking for? How well trained do you want our students to be? They inevitably say the same thing. Please just give us someone who can communicate well and actually maybe go into a meeting and be part of a group and have conversation. They want that fundamental ability to communicate. So that's why I put that emphasis on your roles as communicators. And that, again, is a lifelong pursuit. All right. Thank you. Okay, great.